episode 2 of the podcast. This is the Perspectives in Rural Education podcast. And as I've said before, this podcast will be featuring various guests who will be sharing their perspectives and experiences in rural education. And today we have Brianna Gaston on the podcast, and she is recently graduated from Eastern Illinois University and has just started her career in education. So Brianna, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, so like she said, I just graduated. I just stepped into a role mid-year as a 5th grade teacher in the same school that I student taught in. So we are still pretty fresh.
Awesome. So you're teaching what grade?
5th.
5th grade. Okay.
Yes, students.
Awesome. And so tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your experience growing up in a rural area.
Yeah, so I grew up in Shelbyville, and I graduated with about 73 students. So it was a kind of, everybody, everything, their background, who their parents are, where they live. Some people probably knew their social security numbers. That's how it is. So it was really nice to have like the opportunity to know everybody, because I feel like that kind of led to like more opportunities for sports or organizations, and just kind of being on that personal level with our teachers and administration, rather than walking through a school and not knowing somebody's name.
Mm-hmm. You make such a great point. I grew up in a rural area too. And I feel like that's so true, that you're not involved in one thing, you're involved in like 20 things.
Oh my goodness.
And I think that is a perk to like growing up in a rural area. And like, in order for clubs and organizations and sports to function, like everybody has to contribute to all of those things. They can't just do one.
And usually it's like all the students are involved in the same things, because it's like we're all in student council. So we all have the meetings at this time. I remember the classroom that we met in for student council was packed, because almost everybody did student council. And you probably led some type of a leadership position, because when you got to those junior, senior years, they kind of relied on you to pull the tribe and lead. So
that's so true. And I think it develops like a sense of ownership in students and like a sense of school pride, because they are putting so much effort and time into those things. That's so true.
You get the word school pride. My friends from northern areas always say that I have some type of a pride that they've never seen before, because I'm from a small area. So that kind of brought back some type of a memory that I didn't know I had.
Yeah, that's so true. It's funny how you don't realize your experience is unique until you like talk to your friends, and then you're like, oh, you don't have the same like background as me or the same experience.
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
It's so weird. Okay. So when did you first decide you wanted to go into education?
I didn't decide that I wanted to be a teacher until my freshman year of college, actually. From birth to my freshman year of college, I had this dream of being a marine biologist or working with some type of animal. My senior year of high school, I did an internship through Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. So I spent a summer there, and I laid all my ducks in a row to be a marine biologist. And I honestly could not pass organic chemistry to save my life. And so then I talked to my advisor. There really wasn't anything that I could do. I just could not understand chemistry. So then I was really struggling with it. I talked to my families, and my aunt actually told me at my cousin's football game that she's like, I just always seen you as a teacher. Like, I don't know. I think it'd be cool for you to be a marine biologist, but like, I've just always seen you as a teacher. And then I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. And so then I decided to change my major right at that football game, because I've kind of been ignoring that part of my brain that told me to be a teacher, because my dad was a teacher, my aunt's a teacher. So I was kind of ignoring it. And then once I officially did it and started taking the classes, it just made so much sense.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I love when people speak things over your life where it's like they can see you doing something, or they see your gifts and talents, and how it lines up with a career so well. So that's awesome that she said that to you, and how it all kind of just fell into place.
It did. And I'm teaching science right now, so I'm still able to, I didn't lose my passion for science. I'm just using it in a different way. So that's what I'm doing now with teaching 5th grade science. I'm able to make that connection to my childhood and kind of still be passionate about it.
Yeah, and still like learn about those things with your students, which is really cool.
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome. And so, what was your experience at EIU like? Because I did not go to EIU for undergrad. And so, when I came here for grad school, I was blown away by what a big teaching school it is. Like, I had no idea. I grew up in Illinois, but had no idea. And so, I would love to hear about your experience at EIU.
Yeah, so I actually transferred to EIU. I went to a school up north because it was pretty close to, like I said, Shade Aquarium, where I made those connections up north. So when I decided to change my majors, I knew Eastern was a big education school, so I transferred here to just. I know it's a good program. I was probably going to grow more into myself, being one closer to home because being in a rural area and growing up knowing everybody, it was super duper hard to go to a northern town where I didn't know anybody. I felt like the town never slept, and I just wasn't really a big fan of it. So when I got to EIU, I got super involved, kind of the same way of like going to high school. Eastern is such a small campus; these organizations are also very small. So you're able to make those connections. You know, everybody in the organization. I think I have like 5 organizations that I was involved and held leadership positions with at EIU. So I kind of went that aspect of it was getting involved, putting myself out there, volunteering as much as I could, and making those connections where I feel like today it kind of helped me because am I know the people I'm working with, I had some type of background with the school, and World Teacher Corps has also kind of put my foot in the door without me realizing it. And when educators and administration sees these organizations on your resume, they're like, wow. I remember in my interview, they're like, you were involved like a lot. And I feel like that really helped pave the way to where I am now.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I would love to have you explain for listeners that don't know what is Rural Teacher Corps because I did not know, and so I'd love to hear you explain that too.
So my um, experience with Real Teacher Corps has been going into schools and seeing what they're like because like you had said earlier, it's kind of weird to hear other students' perspective of a school and their system and like their routines because you are so set on what you had done for 4 years that you don't realize that other schools do different things. So my first step with Real Teacher Corps was visiting different schools, talking with the teachers, asking them questions, and then I feel like it really developed into this big organization that Eastern doesn't really I don't want to say appreciate, but EIU and especially some of the college of education majors don't realize real teacher corps is really a thing. Like you're going into the schools, you're interacting with administration and teachers, you're attending these nights that you it's kind of like a job fair that
Mhm.
you're putting your name out there. And when they see your face at these events, they're going to remember you when you are applying and when you're in practicum, even if you don't want to stay in a rural area, doesn't mean that you don't have to join Real Teacher Corps because I think a hard thing to accept is that EIU is in a rural area
Mhm.
and a lot of northern people don't like it. And they it was like, what is there to do? But getting involved with organizations like this doesn't mean that you have to commit to being in a rural area, but
Mhm.
you're learning different aspects of schools. You're kind of broadening your perspective to schools and bringing it to different schools. And you're doing your practicum in these areas. So you're putting yourself out there.
Right. That's so well said. I think that's definitely a misconception that students have about joining Rural Teacher Corps. And I think you bring up such a great point about even if they don't end up in a rural area, it's so beneficial for them to have the perspective of or just understanding rural areas, just like it
Hmm.
is for people who grow up in rural areas to have a better understanding of urban areas. I just think like
Right.
both are important for
I
sure.
did start my education career at my old school, and one of their requirements was to go into the city of Chicago and work with a high needs school in an urban area. So that was a huge eye opening experience for me being in the city with these students that have a way different lifestyle than I could ever imagine. And my heart broke every single day when I went in there, just hearing these kids' stories. So it's really important to see these different types of school systems. It really is.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, yes. That's awesome. What a cool experience. Like
Yeah.
that's so valuable. What is your advice looking back on your time at EIU for students who might be current education majors and maybe looking back at yourself like a couple years ago versus now? What would your advice be?
My advice would be to get involved. Like I said, I think that really shaped who I am because not with just the networking nights, you're also just kind of learning about other people in your program. Like, I don't think I would have made the friends that I have if it wasn't for being in these organizations. And right now, I'm actually teaching with a girl in my program that we were both involved in the same organization. So she also got hired mid-year. So we're all like we're kind of sticking it together and we're kind of getting through it, taking one step at a time together. If it wasn't for putting yourself out there, I probably wouldn't have had the courage to go up to her and say, like, hey, we need to do this thing together because mid-year teaching is not easy.
Hmm. Hmm. That made me think of something. What has it been like walking into school mid-year, starting as a new teacher, and kind of getting to know your coworkers, like other teachers in the building, administrators? Because I think that's a hard thing, and I feel like it's not always talked about.
Yeah. I have a very fortunate circumstance because I actually student taught in the classroom right across the hall.
Okay.
And in Charleston in fifth grade, in fourth grade, starting in fourth grade, they switch classrooms for there's one classroom, math, science, and social studies. The other one is ELA. So I student taught on the ELA side, and then this math, science, social studies teacher decided to move. So then I applied, got my foot in the door, and I just walked right across the hall the same students. I'm working alongside my old cooperating teacher. I knew all the administration. I knew all the coworkers. So this was a very lucky situation that I was able to like put myself in. And
Yeah,
Charleston has really made it so easy for me. But yeah, but it's not easy still. And I
that's
don't have
awesome though.
her in the room to help me out anymore. But
Right. What a smooth transition though to already know the
thank you.
students, especially coming in mid-year, and they probably already have a respect and like a rapport with you where they know what they can get away with and what they can't.
They test me every day. So just because they know me doesn't mean they don't try.
Yeah, I believe it. What's something that you learned in one of your classes that has been really helpful now that you're actually teaching?
You know, I don't know how, probably differentiating instruction because I feel like we talked about it, but we weren't ever able to see it until we got into the classroom. They told us how to differentiate instruction and different ways that you can do it, but it's so easy to do it on pencil and paper. They give you students and they tell you what their needs are, how you need to accommodate, and then you do it. You would tell them what you did. But when you get here, you have to like one, you have to look at their accommodations, see what they need, but you also have to learn and get to know them because some of their needs aren't written down on a paper. You have to give them what they need just by like knowing them and establishing a relationship with them. I feel like differentiation sounds like such a simple concept that you can learn, but I've learned every day like what I can do for one student, I could probably do for all the students. So there's no reason to differentiate for like maybe five students, but I can just do it for the whole class because it's making it easier for everyone. You're not singling those students out, and it's just you'll learn more about your student, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. I feel like that's something I respect so much about teachers is you're not just meeting the need of one student. You're trying to meet all of these different needs across like 20 students or however many you have, which is so much more challenging than I think a lot of people realize. And so like has that been challenging for you, and if so, like what's something that you've done to, I don't know, help?
Absolutely. For me, my homeroom is very um differentiated, and all my students have different needs and different types of needs. Like some kind of overlap, but there are some that it's like completely on the other end of the spectrum. But it's really just trying one thing, and if it doesn't work, you're trying something else. And the students, if they see you working with them, they're also going to work with you. Um, so I've tried to meet. They're very energetic, like very energetic. So I have established some ways that they can get their energy out, but they're still learning. We do vocabularies every day. And I really use that time for my students that are like kind of slower learners. I'm turning on that video so then they can finish up what they were working on while the other students are watching this. They're dancing to get their wiggles out before we start the lesson because I have a lot of wigglers. Um, they're able to sing along if they're singers. So like that's just one thing that I do that really seems to help them focus, get their energy out, and then after the song's over, they know to like sit down. It's time to focus and
Yeah.
do what we need to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely think that's a challenge. Like, not only are students working at all these different levels, but then some people finish things really fast and others take a really long time. And so trying
Yeah.
to keep everybody busy and um,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's definitely a challenge. Um, I would love to hear about how you set up your classroom. Like I feel like that's always an exciting thing when people get to like they get their own classroom, they get to kind of do what they want. And so what are some special things within your classroom or things that you were thinking intentionally about when you were setting it up?
You are so right. That was the most exciting part of this journey. Um, because what I did was just like turn the classroom completely around because the students really need to see that change and see the structure that they didn't get before. So everyone told me going in, like, don't worry about all the little things. Like that's what the summer's for. You're only in mid-year. But I needed everything to be perfect. So I stripped all of the bulletin boards, moved tables around, moved like everything around. Everything had a new place when they got back from winter break. But everything had a place in a new home. It wasn't, it's thrown around. I was teaching them that things have places that they need to be. We're not throwing our trash. And that's one thing that I focused on when setting up my classroom was making sure something's labeled. This one's for the paper. This one's for the pencil. This one is for our dry erase boards and our markers and erasers because it's the little things like that that make the day go more smoothly that really people don't think about. And I don't like to see pencils or whatever laying around or don't have a place. So I think that's one thing that I made sure to focus on was this has a place and it does not leave this place.
Mhm.
So
That's awesome. I didn't even think about like the importance of changing everything within the room so that students really feel the change of like you're a new teacher, this is a new
yes.
environment. That's so smart and it makes so much sense. Um and I love that you like are so structured and everything has a place because I think like that the environment, I never realized as a kid like how much that affects me, but now I'm like when my desk is messy versus when my desk is clean, like my like mental clarity is so much different with those
Yeah.
spaces. And so that's I think that's really cool that you do that. Do you have any funny stories about students?
Um, okay. So my grandma got me this candle and it's like an aromatherapy. I have it on my desk. And it says stress relief. It's wild mint and eucalyptus. Um, so I can't light it obviously because we're in a school. But I thought like maybe if I kept it on my desk and like smelt it whenever I was stressed or like overwhelmed. And my students have picked up on that. And so they can see, like, so we have masks on. So with my eyes, they can tell when I'm stressed. And they'll raise their hand and be like, Miss Gaston, do you need to smell your candle? Or like I had one student pick it up and bring it to me and was like, I think you need to smell this. Um, so that's been kind of fun because they see when I'm overwhelmed, but that also helps them realize what they're doing. And then if they see me smelling my candle or if they see their friend bringing me my candle, they're like, oh, we are doing something we're not supposed to and we need to fix it. So it's kind of a behavior tactic to get them to behave, but also I didn't really mean for this to happen, but they've kind of picked up on it.
That is so funny and so effective. Like it's a
Yeah,
visual for when they might be doing something they're not supposed
I
to.
It wasn't intentional. It just kind of happened and it works.
That's so funny. You're like, "Thanks, grandma. This is really useful."
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what is your vision moving forward for yourself, your career? I was telling you before the podcast, but or before we started recording. But for our listeners, it was awesome to have Victoria Norton on the podcast last week, and she was kind of reflecting back on her career in education. And it's really fun to have you on the podcast this week, looking towards your career in education. And so I'd love to hear about your vision moving forward.
I'm just looking forward to learning how to figure it out because all the like older teachers have said it takes 3 years for you to actually know what you're doing. Um, and 3 years sounds like such a long time, but I'm excited to like learn these next 3 years because teaching like not K because we're elementary, like first through sixth, there's a lot of content and a lot of area that you need to learn in only 4 short years. So I'm just looking forward to like learning more so I can teach and just learning all the little things that you didn't really think to learn in college. There's so many little things that they can't teach you until you do it. So
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to learning because you learn every day and I'm not done. There's a lot more that I know that I can learn and I can do better and getting that student feedback. Sometimes they tell me like that was not an effective way to teach that or that was not an effective reward or consequence. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that's the things that I need to know. And
Mhm.
they do not hesitate to tell you when that was not the right way or like they don't like the way that you did that. So just kind of figuring that out.
It's really cool to hear that you're like willing to receive that because I think I remember as a student like feeling like I couldn't really critique my teachers or like tell them when things weren't effective. And so I think it's really cool that you want to have that relationship with your students
Absolutely.
where they can say those things.
I always tell them
Um,
I'm an open book. I am always willing to take things and give. And sometimes they don't believe me, but I'm like, I really am an open book. Like, you just tell me. And when I need to be a closed book, when you need to like tell me something that I can't tell anybody else, I'm there. So just I'm getting them where they need me to meet them.
that's awesome. I love that. And so, final two questions. One, what is your advice for new teachers? And then two, your most impactful student story. That could be from student teaching, because I know you're what, not even a month into
Yes.
this.
um, my advice for new teachers, I would say just to be consistent. When it's so easy to set your classroom rules, because I feel like that's something that you already have kind of in your mind. This is how I want my classroom to be ran. But when you set those expectations, when you set those rules, like I did my expectations as a class. So we sat down as a class and said, what we were doing before wasn't working. How can we fix it? And they set their own expectations. And what I did was put it in my own words that they were saying. And when you put it in your own words, you have to stick to it and be consistent. Because that one day that you let up and you don't do what you are expected to do or what they're expecting you to do, or like vice versa, they're going to notice it and then they're not going to behave like they are supposed to because you let them get away with it. And I don't mind being the mean teacher that holds my students accountable because it makes for an easier day. And at the end of the day, they respect you when they get their learning done and when they have a successful day rather than a teacher that doesn't really care what they do and wants to be the fun teacher. You didn't get anything done. It's a zoo of a classroom. And that's just not how I want mine to be.
Yeah.
So I try to be as consistent as I can and being consistent as a class as a whole, but to each student because we all have our students that behave better. So it's easier to let them get away with things that you won't want another student. But the students that you don't let it get away with will notice that that student got to do that, but I didn't.
hmm
And I'm guilty of that, very guilty
hmm
of that.
hmm
Just being consistent.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the
Very
question?
well said. The other one was just an impactful student story.
Okay. So I started a new year, mid year. So our very first thing that we did on the first day of school was a new year, new me 2022 resolutions. And I said, what's a life motto that you guys can live by kind of finishing out fifth grade, or something that you want to have them going into sixth grade, because they'll be going into sixth grade in 2022. And that's a very hard transition for fifth, sixth. And one of my students said, I just need to quit waiting for things to happen to me, and I just need to take control of my own life and make decisions for myself. And I was like, holy cow, I need to take that advice, because I do not do that. So just that was so deep for a fifth grader, I thought.
Yeah, so
I think about
profound.
that every day.
Wow. So insightful too. That's crazy. That's awesome though. And so cool that like they're thinking ahead to the sixth grade transition. I didn't know that that was like the year that they transitioned. So that's really cool. Okay. Well, as we wrap up, just thank you for doing this. Thanks for being willing to. I recorded the student panel that you were a part of. And when the idea for the podcast came up, I was like, I have to have her on the podcast. She is so passionate about education. She has so much like wisdom to share. And I think she's going to have a really interesting perspective. And I mean, you killed it. I heard so many things that I wrote down just while you were talking. And I think it's really cool to hear about your experience growing up in a rural school and how rooted you are, and how just those values that were instilled in you then as a student have carried over to your teaching career now, and how being involved is so important and such a special part of rural schools. And so I think that's awesome that you shared that. So thanks for doing this, and I am inspired by just your passion for the field and all the things that you shared. And so thanks for being a part of this.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Episode 2.